The airport was already buzzing with noise that morning. People dragged their suitcases, flight announcements echoed over the speakers, and coffee cups clinked on tables. Amid that busy movement, a tall man in a dark suit walked calmly through the terminal, rolling a small black carry-on behind him. His expression was relaxed, the way someone looks when they've done this 100 times before. He had an early meeting in Atlanta and had chosen this short morning flight because it fit his schedule perfectly. He checked his watch, still 25 minutes to boarding. Everything was going smoothly. He had always liked airports. They reminded him of motion, progress, and possibility. As a child, he used to stand near the fence of a small airstrip near his home, watching planes rise and disappear into the clouds. He never imagined that one day he'd be traveling almost every week for work. Back then, his family couldn't afford even one plane ticket. But life had changed. He worked hard, studied harder, and built a company from the ground up, one that had slowly become known in the logistics and air freight business. Still, he never carried that success on his shoulders. To him, respect wasn't something that came from money or power. It came from how you treated people. And that morning, all he wanted was to quietly take his seat, answer a few emails, and get to his meeting on time. As the boarding gate opened, passengers began to line up. The gate agent, a woman in a crisp uniform, scanned tickets with a smile that looked more like habit than warmth. When it was his turn, he handed her his digital boarding pass and ID. She glanced at the screen, frowned slightly, then looked again. She said, tapping on her keyboard. "Sir, can you hold on a second?" He nodded politely, thinking it might be a simple system glitch. It wasn't uncommon. He waited as she typed again, her expression tightening. "I'm not finding this ticket in our system," she said finally, her tone changing slightly. He opened the email confirmation on his phone and handed it over. "It's right here. Purchased directly from your airline's website." She barely glanced at the screen before shaking her head. "It looks like this confirmation number isn't valid." A few passengers in line began shifting impatiently. The man stayed calm. "Could you please double-check? Maybe it's a system delay." She gave a small sigh, glanced behind him, and waved to the next person in line. "Sir, you'll need to step aside while we sort this out. You might have purchased from a fake site." The word fake made several people nearby glance over. He could feel their eyes now. He kept his tone even. "I assure you it's not fake. It's your own site. I've flown with this airline multiple times." The woman crossed her arms. "Sir, please don't raise your voice." He hadn't raised it at all. His calmness seemed to irritate her even more. Another employee joined her at the counter. They whispered for a moment, then both looked at him with that cautious, judging stare people often give when they've already decided something about you. "Can I see your ID again?" the second employee asked. He handed it over. She looked at it longer than necessary, then checked the name on the screen. "This doesn't match our record. Are you sure this ticket belongs to you?" He took a slow breath. "It's my ticket, and that's my ID. Please just check again." But the second woman had already called for airport security. The announcement crackled softly through the intercom. "Security to gate C12. He turned slightly, trying to remain patient. "There's no need for that. I just want you to check your system properly." The first agent's tone hardened. "Sir, this is for everyone's safety. You'll have to wait aside." He stepped back, still composed, but inside a familiar heaviness pressed on his chest. This wasn't the first time someone had doubted him for no reason. He had faced similar situations before. In stores and meetings, even at his own company's events. Each time he had learned to hold his calm because anger never helped. But it still stung every time. Two security officers arrived, both looking serious but not aggressive. "Sir, we're told there's an issue with your ticket," one of them said. He showed them his phone again, scrolling through the email with the clear logo of the airline, the date, time, and seat number. "Everything is here," he said softly. The officer nodded, taking a closer look. "It does look legitimate." But the gate agent interrupted quickly. "We can't find it in our system. He may have forged it." The second officer looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, it looks fine to me. Maybe you can recheck your end." The agent hesitated, then turned the screen toward them. "See? No record under his name." He spoke quietly, but his voice carried enough weight to make them listen. "Could there be a system delay or error with the booking transfer? I bought it directly. Here's my payment receipt. He pulled up the transaction on his banking app. Still, the agent refused to even look at it. Sir, please cooperate, she said coldly. We can't let you board this flight until we verify everything. The officer gave him a look that said he understood but couldn't intervene further. Maybe it's best if you wait at the side. Sir, he said softly. He stepped aside, standing by the window, watching other passengers pass through easily. Tickets scanned, greetings exchanged, laughter filling the space. A woman with a toddler smiled apologetically as she squeezed past him. He smiled back, trying to hide the weight in his chest. The boarding line grew shorter until the last passenger walked down the jet bridge. The gate agent closed the door, still refusing to acknowledge him. The flight he'd been ready for had left without him. He checked his watch. The meeting in Atlanta would now be impossible to attend on time. His assistant would have to reschedule, but as he stood there, disappointment slowly gave way to something else. A quiet, measured focus. He took a deep breath and looked around the gate area. The same staff who had dismissed him were now chatting casually, unaware of the storm brewing in his mind. He walked over to a quiet corner, pulled out his phone and dialed his assistant. Can you check something for me? He asked calmly. Of course, she replied. What's wrong? I need you to confirm whether our company has any recent correspondence with Air Continental or its regional partners, specifically the Dallas-Atlanta commuter route. There was a brief pause. 1 second, let me check. He waited, eyes fixed on the plane that was now taxiing away from the terminal. Her voice returned in less than a minute. Yes, actually. They sent over some route partnership proposals last quarter. The regional operator's been struggling financially. They were looking for buyers for a few of their routes. He nodded slowly. Interesting. Can you pull up their latest contact information? Right away. Want me to call them? No, he said, his tone still calm. I'll handle this one myself. He hung up and scrolled through his contacts until he found a name, a senior executive he'd met at a conference a few months earlier. He pressed call. The man answered on the third ring, sounding surprised. Hey, I wasn't expecting your call today. How's business? Busy as always, Derek replied with a small smile. Quick question. Is that commuter route between Dallas and Atlanta still on the table? The executive hesitated. You mean the one operated by our regional partner? Yeah, I think they're still open to offers. Why? I'm interested in taking it, he said simply. How fast could that process move? The executive laughed lightly. Well, usually these things take a few weeks to settle, unless someone's serious enough to make a direct acquisition offer. Derek's voice didn't waver. I'm serious. I can have the paperwork and funds ready today. There was a pause on the line. You're not kidding, are you? No, he said. Let's make it happen. The executive cleared his throat. All right. I'll have our legal and operations teams coordinate. If we act fast, we could finalize the agreement in a few hours. Make it faster, Derek said. I'll have my legal team ready in 10 minutes. As he ended the call, a quiet satisfaction settled over him. He wasn't angry. He wasn't planning to humiliate anyone. He just believed in action over argument. He opened his laptop and began sending quick instructions to his team. Concise, professional, efficient. To any onlooker, he was just another traveler tapping away at his computer. But behind those calm eyes, a decision had already been made. The airline had dismissed him as a nobody with a fake ticket. In 11 minutes, that assumption would turn into one of the biggest mistakes they'd ever made. The same gate that had turned him away would soon operate under a new, so wasn't his name. He looked once more at the plane, disappearing into the clouds, took a deep breath and whispered to himself, let's get to work. He sat quietly by the window of the terminal, watching the plane disappear into the sky. Most people would have stormed out or shouted at the staff, but he didn't. Years of experience had taught him that anger doesn't solve anything. When you've built something from scratch, when you've been told no more times than you can count, you learn that calm can be the sharpest response. The terminal was quieter now. Only a few passengers waited for later flights. The gate agents had gone back to their screens, chatting softly as if nothing had happened. Every now and then one of them would glance in his direction, whisper something to another and shake her head. He didn't care anymore. What mattered was what he was about to do next. He opened his laptop again and checked his emails. His assistant had already sent over the latest contact list and the previous proposal from the airline's regional partner. It was all there. Names, numbers, and a copy of their last offer, which mentioned that the Dallas-Atlanta commuter route wasn't performing well. It wasn't a big commercial route, just a small regional one, but it had potential. His company had been thinking about expanding into short-haul operations anyway. He smiled to himself. Fate had a strange sense of timing. The same route that had just denied him boarding might soon become part of his business. He dialed another number, his company's legal consultant. "Hey, I need a quick turnaround," he said as soon as the call connected. "We're buying a regional route, possibly today." The lawyer on the other end sounded surprised. "Today? That's unusually fast." "I know," he replied calmly, "but it's a small acquisition. They've been trying to sell it for a while. If we can move quickly, we can close it within the day." The lawyer hesitated for a second. "All right, I'll prepare a short-term purchase agreement. I'll loop in the finance team." "Who's the seller?" He gave the name of the regional operator and said, "Send a preliminary draft within 10 minutes. I'll handle the rest." Then he called his assistant again. "I'll need all documentation from our previous discussions with Air Continental. Also, get our finance head on standby. We might need wire clearance within the hour." Her tone brightened with excitement. "You're really doing this?" He chuckled softly. "Let's just say it's a good day to make a point." While his team rushed into action, he sat back, still composed. The entire situation felt surreal. Less than 30 minutes ago, he had been treated like someone trying to sneak onto a plane with a fake ticket. Now he was about to buy the entire route that flight operated on. As he sipped his coffee, a young man sitting nearby glanced over. "Hey, weren't you the guy they didn't let board?" he asked quietly, as if not wanting to intrude. He nodded. "Yeah, that was me." The young man frowned. "That was messed up. You didn't even argue. You just stood there. I don't think they even checked properly." He smiled faintly. "That's all right. Sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could." The young man looked at him curiously. "You seemed so calm. I don't think I could have done that." "Calm gives you control," he said simply, "and control lets you decide what comes next." The young man nodded slowly, maybe not fully understanding, but sensing there was something deeper behind those words. He turned back to his screen as a new email came in, the initial purchase draft from his legal team. Everything was moving fast. He reviewed the terms, made a few quick edits, and forwarded it to the executive he'd spoken with earlier. Within minutes, his phone buzzed again. The executive's voice was energetic. "You're serious about this, aren't you? Our finance department just got your agreement." "I told you," he replied calmly. "Let's make it happen." The executive laughed nervously. "You move faster than most corporations I know." "I don't like wasting time," he said, "especially when a good opportunity is right in front of me." They talked for a few more minutes, ironing out final details. The deal wasn't large by corporate standards, but for the regional operator, it was significant enough to help them stay afloat. They were eager to close. All Derek needed to do was send the deposit, and the route would officially transfer to his company's name. He called his finance department next. "Initiate the transfer as per the agreement," he instructed. "Already on it," his finance head said confidently. "Funds will clear in about 5 minutes." He hung up, leaning back in his chair. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same airline that had questioned his right to board would soon be flying under his company's management. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about something deeper. He thought about all the times he'd been underestimated, when clients assumed he was an assistant instead of the owner, when bankers doubted his creditworthiness, when he'd walked into meetings and seen disbelief in people's faces. Every single time he'd responded with quiet results. He didn't need to prove his worth through words. He did it through action. A message popped up on his screen, confirmation from the finance department. The payment had gone through. Another message followed, this time from the executive. "Congratulations. The route is officially yours." He stared at those words for a few seconds. Just like that, the deal was done. 11 minutes from start to finish. He exhaled softly and closed his laptop. He wasn't the type to celebrate loudly. Instead, he felt a quiet sense of peace. The situation had flipped so naturally, so elegantly, that it almost felt like the universe had arranged it. He stood up and began walking toward the same gate that had denied him. The two agents were still there, talking and laughing between themselves. They didn't notice him at first. When they finally did, one of them frowned slightly, as if wondering why he was still around. "Sir, can we help you?" she asked politely. Though her tone carried a hint of impatience, he smiled gently. "No, I just wanted to let you know something important." "That flight you just boarded? The Dallas-Atlanta route? My company just bought it." The woman blinked, clearly thinking she misheard him. "I'm sorry, like what?" He held up his phone, showing her the signed document and confirmation email from the airline's regional office. Her face changed immediately. The color drained from her cheeks. You mean you're—" she stammered. "Yes," he said calmly. "The new owner of this route. You might receive an internal notice soon." She just stood there, speechless. The second agent came closer, reading over her shoulder, her eyes widening in disbelief. He didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. His point was already made without a single harsh word. He nodded politely and turned to leave. As he walked away, a few airport staff who had witnessed the earlier scene whispered among themselves. No one could believe what they had just heard. He found a quiet corner near the large glass windows overlooking the runway. He stood there for a while, watching another plane taxi out. The reflection of the sunlight on its wings reminded him of the countless times he'd promised himself to rise above the noise. Not just in business, but in life. Success, he thought, should never come from spite. It should come from principle. He remembered his father's words when he was young. "You don't have to shout to be powerful. Just let your work speak louder than your anger." Those words had guided him through every stage of his journey, and today, once again, they had proven true. His phone buzzed again. A message from his assistant. "Media's going to pick this up fast if it leaks," she wrote. "Want me to control the narrative?" He replied, "No need. We don't make noise. We just move forward." He placed his phone down and closed his eyes for a brief moment, breathing deeply. The same terminal that had witnessed his humiliation now felt completely different. Not because he had gotten even, but because he had turned an unfair moment into a chance to grow his company. He opened his eyes again and smiled faintly. In less than half an hour, everything had changed. Behind him, the gate agents were whispering frantically, their earlier arrogance replaced by quiet panic. He didn't turn around. He didn't want apologies or explanations. What he wanted was simple respect. Not the kind that came from fear, but the kind that came from understanding. He adjusted his jacket, picked up his carry-on, and walked slowly toward the exit. His stride was calm, confident, and unbothered. To most people, it might have looked like just another businessman catching his next flight. But for him, it was something much more, a quiet victory that didn't need applause. As he stepped outside the terminal, sunlight washed over his face. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of closure. The morning had begun with disrespect, but it ended with dignity. He opened the car door, got in, and leaned back as the driver started the engine. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. He looked out the window, still watching the distant planes. "Back to the office," he said softly. "We've got a new route to manage." And with that, the car pulled away, leaving behind the airport, where a simple misunderstanding had turned into a moment of quiet, graceful power. The next morning began quietly, but inside his office the energy was already shifting. His team was buzzing with excitement. Overnight, the news had started to spread in small business circles. A logistics company had acquired a regional airline route in record time. What most people didn't know, though, was why it had happened. Only a handful of his closest staff knew the real story behind the decision. He sat at his desk sipping his morning coffee, scrolling through the documents one last time. The route's purchase had gone through without a hitch. Everything was officially under his company's control. The planes, the schedule, the crew, even the operational contracts. It was now part of his growing aviation network. His assistant entered the room holding a tablet. "You might want to see this," she said with a small smile. "The airline's headquarters just sent a memo. They've informed all employees about the new ownership." He nodded slowly. "Good, that should settle it." "They sound nervous," she added. "Apparently, the regional manager is in shock. He didn't expect the sale to close overnight." He smiled faintly. "People rarely expect calm decisions to move fast. They confuse patience with weakness." She nodded, understanding. "Do you want to fly the route today?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Let's go see how things are running." By afternoon, he was back at the same airport. The same terminal where everything had happened less than 24 hours ago. It felt strange walking through it again. The same walls, the same sounds, the same faint smell of coffee and jet fuel. But this time something was different. He wasn't a passenger anymore. He was the owner of one of the very routes operating through here. He approached the same gate, C12, with a quiet expression. The two agents from the day before were there again, though now their demeanor was different. Their posture was stiffer, their smiles forced. One of them noticed him first and froze slightly before whispering something to her coworker. Both of them turned pale. He didn't say anything at first. He simply stood there watching them scramble to look busy. The scene almost felt unreal, like watching a replay of a moment but from a different life. Finally, one of the agents approached him hesitantly. "Good afternoon, sir," she said in a careful tone. "Welcome back." He could tell she had been rehearsing those words. "Afternoon," he said calmly. "How's everything running today?" "Oh, very smooth," she said quickly. We received the internal notice this morning about the new ownership." "Congratulations, sir." "Thank you," he said simply. "I just came by to see how things are going." "You're still handling the Dallas-Atlanta route, right?" "Yes, sir," she replied nervously. "The crew's getting ready for boarding." He nodded. "Good, keep it professional. Every passenger deserves that." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Yes, sir." "I understand." He didn't linger on it. He wasn't there to shame them. He wanted them to understand something much bigger. That respect isn't given because of titles or uniforms. It's given because it's the right thing to do. As he turned to leave, one of the younger staff members who hadn't been there yesterday approached him quietly. "Sir," she said softly, "I heard what happened yesterday. I just wanted to say that wasn't right." "You handled it better than anyone could have," he smiled gently. "Thank you. But what matters is that it never happens again, to anyone." She nodded, eyes filled with respect. "It won't, sir. Not on my watch." He gave a small nod of approval and walked toward the observation area near the large glass windows. From there, he could see the aircraft being prepared for departure. It was a small commuter jet, clean, reliable, and efficient. It didn't look like much to most people, but to him, it represented something powerful. In less than half a day, a moment of humiliation had turned into an opportunity for transformation. Not just for him, but for everyone who would ever fly that route again. While he stood there, his phone buzzed. It was the airline's senior operations manager. "Sir, congratulations on the acquisition," the man said. "We're honored to have your leadership on board. I was told you experienced some trouble at the gate yesterday. I sincerely apologize for that." He paused before answering. "Thank you. But I'm not looking for apologies. I'm looking for change. I want every employee, from check-in to cockpit, to understand that passengers deserve respect no matter who they are or what they look like." The manager responded quickly. "Absolutely, sir. I'll ensure our staff receives proper customer handling training immediately." "Good," he said softly. "And make it real training, not just a slideshow they forget in a week." The manager promised to make it happen and thanked him again before hanging up. He stood for a moment, thinking about how life had led him to this exact point. There were so many times he could have reacted differently, could have let anger take control. But this quiet, controlled decision felt right. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. As he turned to leave the gate area, the first agent called out softly, "Sir?" He looked back. She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry for how I treated you yesterday. I didn't know who you were, and I acted unkindly." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "You don't need to know who someone is to treat them right." Her eyes filled with regret. "You're right, sir. I'll remember that." He nodded once, then walked away. Later that evening, back at his office, he gathered his senior staff for a short meeting. They sat around the large conference table, the city skyline glowing through the glass walls behind them. Everyone looked eager but also curious. "I know this purchase seemed sudden," he began, "but it was necessary. What happened yesterday reminded me how easily people can lose their sense of respect and fairness. We can't control how others act, but we can control how we respond and how we lead." He paused, letting the words sink in. "From now on, every route we own, every service we run, will follow one rule. Dignity first. It doesn't matter if someone's a janitor, a CEO, or a traveler in economy class. Everyone gets treated like they matter. The room was silent for a moment, then filled with nods of agreement. His operations manager spoke up. "That's a powerful standard, sir. It'll set us apart, that's the goal," he said. "We don't just want to run flights. We want to represent what respect looks like in motion." After the meeting, he stayed behind for a few minutes, looking out at the city lights. He thought about how far he had come, from being that kid who used to watch planes from the fence to now owning the very routes that connected cities. He remembered that feeling. At the airport, the sting of being doubted, the frustration of being dismissed. But now it all made sense. Sometimes moments of discomfort opened doors that would have stayed closed otherwise. His assistant entered quietly, holding a folder. "Here's the media statement you asked for," she said. "It's short and simple, just like you wanted." He read it over. It didn't mention the incident or the humiliation. It simply announced the new acquisition and the company's commitment to improving passenger experience and regional connectivity. He smiled. "Perfect. Let's release it tomorrow morning." As she left, he leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes for a moment. The office was quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside. He thought about how easy it would have been to lose control at that airport, to argue, to shout, to demand respect through confrontation. But he'd learned long ago that real strength is quiet. He opened his eyes again, feeling calm and centered. The deal was done. The message had been sent, not through anger, but through action. Before heading home, he took one last look at the framed photo on his desk. His younger self standing near that small-town airstrip, eyes wide as a plane flew overhead. He smiled softly. That boy could never have imagined this day. Life had come full circle, in its own quiet, poetic way. The next day, headlines began to appear online. Entrepreneur acquires regional airline route in record time. New ownership promises fairness and dignity in the air. Comment sections filled with curiosity and admiration. People wanted to know the full story, but he didn't share the details. He didn't need to. Those who needed to understand already did. Later that week, as he prepared to take a short flight for another meeting, he walked down the jet bridge of the same route, this time as its owner. The crew greeted him with genuine smiles. No one questioned his ticket. No one doubted who he was. He took his seat by the window, looking out at the runway stretching into the horizon. As the plane began to move, he smiled quietly to himself. The world had a funny way of testing your patience. Sometimes it pushes you to the edge, not to break you, but to see how strong you've become. And at that moment, as the engines roared and the plane lifted gracefully into the clouds, he knew one thing for sure. Staying calm had been worth it. When the call came through to the gate office, the supervisor almost dropped the phone. The man on the other end, a senior operations manager, was speaking in a tone that was both urgent and controlled. He said there had been an ownership update, something to do with the company's commuter routes, and that all staff needed to stay calm and follow instructions. The supervisor had no idea what that meant until he heard the name. When he looked across the terminal and saw the same man sitting quietly near the window, everything started to make sense. Derek didn't look up right away. He was reading something on his phone, completely at ease, as though the whole situation earlier had never happened. The same security guard who had walked him off now stood awkwardly a few feet away, pretending to check his radio. The crew members at the counter had gone silent. They kept glancing at one another, hoping someone else would take charge, but no one knew what to say. Finally, the supervisor walked over. His steps were slow, unsure. He stopped near Derek and cleared his throat softly. "Sir, excuse me, I'm very sorry about what happened earlier. There seems to have been some misunderstanding," he said, trying to find the right words. Derek looked up, his face calm, almost gentle. "A misunderstanding?" he asked, not in anger but curiosity. "You accused me of trying to use a fake ticket, took me out of line, and had me questioned in front of 100 people. I'd say that's more than a misunderstanding." The supervisor swallowed hard. I know, sir. I completely agree. It shouldn't have happened. I take full responsibility." For a few seconds, Derek didn't reply. He simply looked around the terminal, watching the people waiting, the noise of rolling suitcases and the distant sound of announcements echoing through the hall. Then he stood up. "Let's talk somewhere private," he said quietly. The supervisor nodded and led him toward a small office near the gate. Inside, the noise of the airport faded, replaced by the low hum of an air conditioner. Derek stood by the desk while the supervisor stayed near the door, still unsure whether he was about to be scolded or fired. "I don't need an apology," Derek said finally. "But I do want to know something. When you saw me at the counter earlier, did it ever cross your mind that you might be wrong, or that maybe you should double-check before calling security?" The supervisor sighed. "Honestly, sir, I didn't. The system showed an invalid code. It happens sometimes, and usually it means the ticket was fake. I should have handled it differently." "I'm truly sorry." Derek nodded slowly. "That's fair. Systems fail. People make mistakes. But what really matters is how you treat someone in that moment. You could have asked me to step aside politely. You could have verified it another way. Instead, you made me feel like a criminal for trying to board a flight I paid for." The man lowered his head. "You're right," he admitted quietly. "There's no excuse." Derek looked at him for a long moment, then said, "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. But I do want you to understand that respect shouldn't depend on appearance, skin color, or the size of someone's wallet. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." The supervisor's voice trembled a little. "Yes, sir. You're absolutely right," Derek nodded again. He could see the guilt written all over the man's face. "I don't want anyone here to lose their job," he added. "But I do expect things to change. Because as of today, this route and this operation belong to my company." The supervisor blinked. "I'm sorry, sir." "What do you mean by that?" Derek smiled faintly. "I bought the route this morning. The papers are already signed. From today forward, your regional flights on this connection will operate under my aviation group's management." For a moment, the supervisor just stood frozen. He couldn't form a single word. He had heard rumors that the airline was selling parts of its network, but he never imagined the man he had just humiliated would end up owning the route. I don't know what to say," he whispered finally. "Then don't say anything," Derek replied. "Just do better next time." Outside the office, the same crew who had been laughing earlier were now gathered near the counter, trying to act busy. One of the flight attendants whispered to another, "Is it true? Did he really buy the route?" The other shrugged, her face pale. "That's what they're saying. He's the new boss." When Derek stepped out of the office, the entire crew went silent. You could hear the distant rumble of planes taking off outside, but inside the terminal, time seemed to pause. The young woman who had scanned his ticket earlier avoided eye contact. The man who had called security shifted his weight nervously, pretending to look at his watch. Derek walked up to them and stopped a few feet away. His expression was calm, but his presence filled the space with quiet authority. "I'm not here to make anyone feel small," he said softly. "What happened this morning should never happen again to anyone. Not to a customer, not to a traveler who's nervous, not to someone who looks different or dresses differently. You never know who you're talking to, and you never know what they've been through just to get to that counter." No one said a word. A few employees nodded slowly, their faces red with shame. Derek looked at them one by one, making sure his message was clear. Then he said, "I'll be in touch with the operations manager. We'll be reviewing procedures for customer interactions and training sessions starting next week. My hope is that no one here ever repeats this mistake." He started to walk away, but then paused and turned back. "Professionalism costs nothing," he said quietly, "but it changes everything." With that, he walked toward the exit, his phone already buzzing with messages from his assistant and legal team. The entire terminal watched him go, a mix of disbelief and admiration spreading through the crowd. The same man they had seen escorted away hours earlier was now walking out as the owner of the very route he had been denied. Once he reached the main lobby, Derek stopped near a large window overlooking the runway. Planes were taking off one after another, disappearing into the clouds. He stood there for a moment, thinking about everything that had just happened. There was no anger left in him, just a quiet understanding of how easily people judge others without knowing their story. A few minutes later, the operations manager called. "We've completed the paperwork, Derek," the man said. "The transition will take a few weeks, but your company now controls the route and associated crew operations." "Good," Derek replied. "Let's start by organizing a meeting with their supervisors. I want every employee to understand that this isn't about revenge. It's about raising the standard," the manager agreed. "You handled this with a lot more grace than most people would have." Derek gave a small laugh. "Sometimes silence speaks louder than shouting." He hung up and sat down near a coffee shop, ordering a cup and pulling out his tablet. As he sipped slowly, he thought about how easily things could have gone differently. If he had lost his temper or shouted at the gate, maybe the staff would have used that against him. Instead, he had let calm and clarity do the talking. Meanwhile, word of what happened began spreading among the airline staff. Some didn't believe it at first until official emails started arriving from the corporate office, confirming the ownership change. A few employees from the gate area quietly approached Derek as he sat there, unsure how to begin. One of them finally said, "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. You could have gotten us all in serious trouble, but you didn't. I appreciate that." Derek smiled politely. "Just learn from it. That's all I ask." When his assistant called again to update him on logistics, she sounded amazed. "You really did it in under 12 minutes. Everyone here is still shocked," Derek chuckled softly. "Sometimes you don't need a long speech to make a point." He sat for another few minutes, finishing his coffee as people passed by without recognizing him. In that quiet corner of the airport, he felt a sense of peace, not pride, but something deeper. He wasn't just proving a point to a few rude employees. He was showing what dignity looks like in action. Later that day, as he prepared to leave the airport, he looked one last time at the terminal where it all happened. The same crew was still working, now speaking in hushed tones, clearly reflecting on the day. Derek didn't wave or make any grand gestures. He simply nodded once as if to say, "We're good," and walked toward the exit. The sun was starting to set, casting golden light through the glass walls. Derek walked slowly, his reflection trailing beside him. In his mind, he wasn't thinking about revenge or victory. He was thinking about leadership, about how one calm choice could rewrite the tone of an entire moment, and about how sometimes change doesn't come from raising your voice, but from standing tall and letting your actions speak for you. A week after the incident at the airport, the story had already begun to spread across the aviation industry like quiet wildfire. It wasn't the kind of story that made headlines with drama or noise. It spread because people admired the calmness of it, the quiet power behind what Derek had done. At first, it was just a few posts online. Someone from the airline had anonymously shared a short message on a professional forum saying, "A passenger was wrongly accused of using a fake ticket. Turns out he owns an aviation company. 11 minutes later, he bought the route." People thought it was a rumor, some made-up story to teach a lesson about respect. But then the facts began to line up. The flight route's ownership had officially changed. The new managing partner was Derek's firm. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know more. Yet Derek himself stayed silent. He didn't post anything, didn't release a statement, didn't even mention the incident to the media. He went back to his work routine as though nothing unusual had happened. For him, the matter wasn't about fame or revenge. It was about a principle, a quiet reminder to the world that dignity still mattered, and that calm action was more powerful than loud confrontation. His assistant, however, was amazed at how the story was inspiring people. "You should see the messages we're getting," she told him one morning. "People from everywhere are writing about how you handled that moment. They say it gave them hope." Derek smiled faintly. "Hope is good," he said, "but I hope they also remember that success doesn't give you permission to look down on anyone. Respect goes both ways." Meanwhile, within the airline, things had started to change quickly. The regional manager arranged a special meeting with all ground staff and flight crews. The message was clear. Professionalism and kindness were no longer optional. Every employee was reminded that a uniform or position didn't make anyone better than the people they served. The incident had shaken them deeply, especially because it showed how easily assumptions could destroy someone's dignity. A few of the crew members who had been there that day wrote letters to Derek, thanking him for not using his power to get them fired. They admitted that they had learned a lesson they would never forget. Derek read those letters quietly in his office one evening. He didn't show them to anyone. He just placed them in a drawer beside his desk as a reminder of what quiet strength could do.